Hello everybody, it's vanburman here. Welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be taking a look at the GTX 660 Ti, which I have right here. This is the Asus Direct CU2 edition, so has a lot of these copper heat pipes on it and actually a pretty decent cooler on there. It also has, which I think is quite neat because I've not seen it on too many other cards before, and you can't tell, but it has some LEDs on the back to let you know if the PCIe power is connected properly or not, which is quite a cool thing. I've got some other shots and stuff for this, which I'm sure I'll overlay. Must apologise to start off with, this is going to be a little bit longer video than normal, just while I'm getting to grips with the new formats that I'm trying to go on, where we start looking at more frame-timey stuff, which I think is actually quite important to evaluating a card, especially sort of old cards nowadays in terms of how well they are holding up. So yeah, I'll apologise for that. I also had to capture with my camera, like the screen with my camera, unfortunately, because my capture card isn't working. I'm in the process of sorting that out, but the issue I was getting with OBS is it was throwing the frame times way out of sync. As you can imagine, you know, it uses computer resources and whatnot, so it doesn't give us the full, it doesn't really give us a good point of reference to look at, you know, in terms of for you guys to be able to see, because what I will see looks nothing compared to what I'd be able to show you guys. So that for me is a big one, but it's just one of those, can't get around that for now, or else I would never release this video. So the 660 Ti came out in August 2012. It directly competed with the 7870 from AMD, from the Radeon division, and that came out, I don't know, 6 months earlier or so. We had a look at that one, didn't we, in a previous video, so I'm not really looking at it in terms of comparisons for this. I'm more sort of looking at it by itself, but I will throw in a short evaluation on the comparison between those cards in terms of how they've held up. You know, even though they're roughly very similar in terms of VRAM, modern prices, you know, everything, they're very similar. So that's quite interesting. The core, I managed to overclock that to 1215 megahertz, which is a little bit, or quite a lot different to what I've seen on the actual website for the spec of that. It was 980 megahertz boost clock, but I only overclocked it by, I think, about 115, 120 megahertz. So I don't know what was going on there. Memory clock, same thing. My readout was showing that it was 3206, which is massively ahead of the 1508 that I'm being told on the spec sheet. So yeah, not really too sure what's going on there. There's some disparity somewhere. And of course, 2 gigabytes of GDDR5 RAM. Very good, been around for a long while, and as you would expect, I suppose. Price paid for this for me was £44. I have owned this card previously, back when it was new. Can't remember how much I paid for it then. A lot more than £44, I can imagine. Obviously, graphics card prices are all over the shop at the minute, even used ones, even ones like this. So yeah, definitely will be selling for a lot more than that now. You know, especially one of the quote-unquote better ones. So I did also run the usual benchmarks that I ran previously, just because I'm keeping my master benchmark spreadsheet up to date. But that allows me, of course, to do the comparison with the 7870. There you go. So the reason that this video is how well does it do in 2021 is mainly because I took some games from 2020 as a main point of focus that we're going to look at. So we've got Mount and Blade 2, Bannerlord. We'll be looking at that one, obviously my game of the year. Star Wars Squadrons, something that I've been looking to get in, well, not necessarily that game, but a game that I've been looking to get into because I want to have a go with using a joystick again, like I did way back, and also Cyberpunk 2077. So the main idea is not to sort of be able to get max settings or anything like that, of course, because it's just not possible, but can we get a playable experience? Could I use this card this year? Could I use my test bench basically this year and still be able to play all the stuff I want to play? We'll have a look at that. So one of the things, or one of the big bits, which is perhaps a little bit more I guess not complicated, but a bit more unusual, is the frame time L shape. So it's one of the graphs within CapFrame X where, what is it, Frame Cap X, sorry, where it shows the milliseconds from the 99th to the 100th, so like which are the extremity points effectively, and what you're looking for is it to form a perfect L. The closer it looks to an L, the better, so we will go through that in a bit more detail, show you some examples, and that will probably make a bit more sense. But I've gone on for a really long time, literally just in the preamble, so yes, let's get into it. So we're going to start by taking a look at all the usual benchmarks that we go through, so your Left 4 Deads, Dooms, etc. As you can see on the sort of lower requirement games, it tends to do really well, and then it struggles on the higher settings on more modern titles. I did do some further testing, which I haven't included in here, but generally if the settings are dropped down, you get a lot more playable experience out of this particular card. So even though these aren't terrible, you can clearly tell that it's not up to, you know, high resolution textures and what have you. Now The Witcher 3 is a very specific one, so I did this versus a 7870, and as you can see, they both struggle with it on Ultra, but as soon as you drop that down to medium, they both become actually quite playable, no minimums under 30, and this is really quite indicative of the experience between the two cards as a whole. The 7870 in my testing was better than the 660 Ti. The good thing is they're both roughly about the same price, so you can extrapolate the rest of this video for the 7870 as well as we go through and have a look at the games in 2021. So taking a look at Cyberpunk 2077, this is the, well, probably a screen you'll be seeing quite a lot of. This is the CapFrame X screen, and from here we have all sorts of lovely metrics. Obviously went through this previously on another video, but a lot of the stuff is really quite interesting when we have a look at how well a game performs. Now, Cyberpunk 2077 was not a particularly smooth experience for 90% of the time, pretty much. In driving, it's all but near impossible, to be fair, and you know, that is coupled with the fact that I ran it 1080p lowest settings, 50% resolution scaling. Made no difference actually putting it on 720p, and just you couldn't even really see what was going on. Everything just looked so soft. So that's just, unfortunately, nature of the beast when it comes to, you know, brand new titles, which is, you know, why we can have a look at it really. So the average overall was 23.5. That's probably slightly misleading, and also the 1%, the 1% low was 14.7. So, you know, you might think, oh, that's not too bad, but the problem is we don't have anywhere, there's nowhere to lower it, which is the problem. And yeah, it's a little bit sort of all over the shop as well. Like this bit here was driving, you can probably tell. This bit here was a bit in the car as well. So, you know, and that sort of thing is a bit of a shame, because, you know, had it held up, you know, carried out the testing in Night City, then we may have been on to perhaps a slightly different conclusion here, but it's very difficult to talk about anything particularly good. So what I really like is that we also get a stuttering analysis here. So all I'm trying to do really, you can't see my mouse, but there you go, I need to fix that. All I'm trying to do here really is just show where, is just like try and back up my feelings on the game with evidence. And you can see there's a low FPS of 130 seconds was classed as low FPS. Now, as far as I'm aware, that means anything under 30. So, yes, it's pretty bad. No, not much stuttering though, which is good. You know, there's some elements at play that are working quite well. And I should also say that the 660 Ti is below the minimum specifications for Cyberpunk, so we shouldn't be actually too surprised. If we have a look at the frame times now, as you can see, it's not actually too bad in terms of, you know, we're not sort of jumping around massive spikes. They are sort of contained peaks, I suppose, but this is still an example of what I would class as a particularly bad frame time graph. You know, we sort of want to think about 50 as our like max peak that we'd want to see really, and even then that's too high. So we've got this great big peak up here, we've got lots of peaks over 50 and around 50. Really, you know, another spike here. There's not much of this that is in any way acceptable frame rate wise. Apologies. Got a nice V and a W here there. But yes, it's not the worst one you'll ever see, but it's not good. And we can then hopefully have a look at that with the L shape, which effectively is the top 10% quartile effectively figures. And what we actually want to look, or what I've decided that is sort of the best way of judging where we're at, is to look at your 90%. So at the start of the graph, so we're looking at 56.5 milliseconds, which is, as I say, really high. You don't want anything above 50 ever, really, for smooth gameplay. And then the 99.5%. So usually that is sort of the, if you think about it being a right angle, you know, that's the corner of your L, is usually where you would see that, where the balance starts to tip. So a more two straight lines is almost what you want to see here. And if we have a look there, you know, we're looking at, what, 14.2 milliseconds. So that's a decent uplift between this point and that point. Not the most curvy line I've seen or I have on here so far, but the fact that we're already over 50 milliseconds is bad. Really, I would want to see, if I was looking for something acceptable, I'd want to see this about 50. So, and then obviously you've got the higher, the 99.95% percentile is at 90.5. I mean, that's by the by at this point, really. There's not too much to extrapolate from that. We know we had a few or some frames of stuttering, so it's not surprising. So unfortunately, can't really give Cyberpunk 2077 any sort of passing mark in terms of being playable, because quite frankly it just isn't, as you can see. And it's nice to be able to show it in a more sort of visual way. You know, this will definitely be something that I will personally learn as we go and do more, but it'll also be something that is, you know, quite obvious, and I can say with hopefully a lot more conviction going forward. So this is more for my own amusement than anything, but decided to have a go at trying to plot a frame time graph for Cyberpunk 2077. It actually came out pretty well. I shouldn't have added the glow on and stuff, and you can only do seemingly a maximum of 1500 frames, but I think this will be quite useful going forward. You can see that in this particular section there is quite the high spikes that happen early on, and you can see also by the scaling as well that it does tend to peak and stay quite high as well. You know, ideally we'd want this to be, you know, a fairly like as flat as possible line. So taking a look at Deus Ex, Mankind Divided, a brilliant game, obviously a few years older now, but very much in the same sort of ethos as Cyberpunk. Now I did this at many resolutions. I did it on high, low and medium, just to try and give us a bit more of a broader church as to where we're sort of sitting. So this one here, I don't think it says that it's the high one, but this is the high setting on here. And, you know, actually, while we are hitting around 50, we're not doing 50 milliseconds, sort of that range. It's not great, and I think you could tell that anyway by the FPS figures. It's 26.7 average, 0.1 or 20.4, and that's not too bad of a disparity. It's quite good. It means that, you know, there isn't the stuttering, as you can see, none of that, which is nice. We had one massive spike, unfortunately, but that's just the nature of it. It was all ran on a benchmark, so it's all very repeatable, which is good. The FPS is, yeah, you know, as you would expect from a benchmark, a bit up and down. The L shape on here is actually really good. The issue, I mean, there's not hardly any variance between your 90% and your 99.5, which I can't even see because it's all clustered in there. Let me zoom in. 99.5 is 49.4. So you're looking at, what, a 2.5%? Sorry, 2.5 milliseconds. So yeah, incredibly flat L, quite a high, you know, top end, which obviously you were seeing on the previous one. But eventually where I decided to settle it was at medium. So as you can see on here, the L shape is not actually as good. I think it's probably a little bit higher, is it? 2 point... Oh no, about to say, actually it's a bit less. So, but we're running on a lower baseline, which is nice. No seconds of, or no even single frames of stuttering. Obviously, we do still have the odd spike up, but it's in the same place as the last one. And the average is 31.5 and the point was 24.4. Now, it may not sort of seem like there's a huge amount of difference, because in reality, there is not that much difference, talking about a couple of frames. But if you look, we're looking at the L shape, then we're seeing actually lower numbers, which is better. A lower difference between 90% and 99.5, a much lower 99.95 percentage, and a lot less seconds of low FPS. You know, we've gone from 41 to 7.5, 7.6. So the good thing we can do on here as well, that's not the right chart, that's Cyberpunk. It saves, instead of clearing it when you go off, it saves the last one you were looking at. So we can overlap these two now. So our green line is our high and our orange line is our medium. So you can see that there is a big downtick in terms of the frame timing. You know, we are definitely running, we're running almost 10 milliseconds below the whole time, which is a huge improvement. Now, see that this is where we sort of look between the frames per second. You might think, well, you might as well run it on high, because in terms of frames per second, there's not that much of an uplift going down to medium. What you do actually get here is a big difference in your frame time delivery. And I think that, you know, that's something that we can use going forward, and that will actually show us some good results from card to card as well, which I'm quite looking forward to. Does it say we can see the L shape? Oh, yes, so yeah, underneath here we can also see the L shape. That's a really good comparison for me. I think, you know, they're very flat lines, both of them, which is good. It means that the card is suitable for the game, if you ask me. And I think on medium you would have a really sort of playable experience, but, you know, not sort of super smooth in any way, shape or form. I couldn't get it down to 60 FPS, even if we put low in. I'll just stick low in very quickly. And you see we had some issues on low. It's absolutely all over the shop. The L shape is a lot better, of course. You know, we're coming down by almost another 10 milliseconds there. Is it 10 milliseconds? Oh no, about 5, 6. But yeah, there was some definitely something strange going on there with this, which is why I didn't want to really include it in here, but just thought it was interesting to bring up. So you get these oddities pop up from time to time. So yes, that's Deus Ex Mankind Divided. More than playable. I think on the 660 Ti, I had a playthrough on a mission, went perfectly fine, didn't have any major drops or issues in it. So yeah, I think we can call that one a pass for the 660 Ti. Just a quick one, because I almost forgot to include it. I don't have any footage or anything else for it, but I did Total War Saga Troy, and we managed to get, this is going to surprise nobody, because you can probably spot a theme at the minute, we managed to get some decent results at medium. So this is our medium line. We'll just do a quick comparison of the high, medium and low. But yeah, as you can see, medium is at the minute looking like sort of the best way to go. I think, you know, you can see it falling way below that 50, that like top end 50 millisecond mark. Way better than the high, which is your green. And then, you know, you probably would want maybe a mixture of the two, of low and medium, or maybe medium with a couple of high bits in there, depending on where you want to sit. But yeah, generally Total War Saga Troy is more than playable. I imagine this probably, or definitely, extrapolates to the Warhammer games, probably does very similarly to Three Kingdoms. The average was only 29, but, you know, for those type of games, it's very dynamic, very fluid in terms of being on the campaign map and being in battles and that sort of stuff. So yeah, I think some tweaking of medium settings would give you a pretty playable experience, and I think anything generally around 30 is pretty fine for me when it comes to the Total War games. So there you have it. Yep. Total War Troy, because obviously that came out in 2020 as well. So our penultimate one to look at is Star Wars Squadrons. Now I didn't bother testing it at any other settings. I didn't put it on high, low. I went straight for medium because I thought, you know, this is about where we're sitting now in terms of a right balance for the GTX 660 Ti in terms of, you know, trying to get the best performance. Now I was actually really impressed. Star Wars Squadrons came out in 2020 in October, and I don't think it's particularly well known for being a particularly demanding game, but there are other space shooter games that are particularly demanding. So it was quite interesting to see how we would have a look at that and how it extrapolates out. So in this particular title, we managed to get an average of 63.4 over the holy grail of 60 FPS. I must say, actually, pretty important when it comes to, you know, a space shooter or any sort of shooter. So that's really good to see. Point while lower, 31.6. So once again, you know, we're not dropping below 30. We're in the 30 to 60 range, which, you know, puts us in pretty good stead for, you know, any sort of, or majority of G-Sync panels, which is nice. That should help out quite a lot. We had 2.62 seconds of stuttering, which I think will allow that one because this was one of the longer benchmarks that I took. So, and it was on story missions as well, on a story mission I should say. So, you know, there is some scripted stuff in there. Obviously we had this big, oh no, that must have been a menu or something at the end. But yeah, it's still, you know, pretty good. Well, look at the frame times now. Couple of spikes here and there. I think it's weird actually. When you first press to use your gun, you get a weird spike for some reason. But it's only, as you can see, minor, like not even half a second. I mean, I don't know how many of them there are, but I imagine that's where the stuttering comes in. I'm not sure what's causing that because clearly, you know, it's not an issue with the graphics overall. And once you start firing, not a problem. And once you've, you know, fired on and off for a bit, it's fine. It's when you stop firing for, I don't know, a minute or two, or like half a minute, and then try and start firing again, it starts up. So a weird idiosyncrasy there, but yeah, just something to note. We'll have a quick look at the L shape. Not actually that good. I'm surprised. I was coming into this thinking, actually, that'll be okay. The good part about this one is, though, is that we have quite a low number overall, so we're below 20 up until we get to 95%. It then does take a bit of an uptick, but our highest is under 50 as well, where we max out. So, you know, presumably down to, I would say, the stutters that we had throughout the, what is it, like 10-minute play, 10-minute benchmark. So, yeah, it's one of those things that happens, I guess. But it wasn't a bad experience by any stretch of the imagination, you know, and I think this is why we have to look at all these things together. I've been actually fairly enjoying the Squadrons thing. I've played through a little bit of the campaign so far, very early on. I've not really had much chance to have a proper play around with it, but I definitely feel as though with the GTX 660 Ti, I could quite easily have an enjoyable experience playing on Squadrons with it. Obviously I've got it on my main computer as well, but I played a long time on the test bench actually, and I played it before and after I started benchmarking, so just I was getting into it, which is nice. And I think the medium preset as well is pretty decent in this game. I know that's not the same across all titles, but this one in particular is actually quite good. So I thought that was another one worth showing, and obviously, you know, just a bit of a one-off for, presumably, I think, for the 660 Ti, and one that it quite frankly shined in, or shone in, I suppose. So there you go. Never get bored of playing Mount & Blade 2 Bannerlord, so I have a sort of fairly stringent benchmark that I do for this. It's a battle of 100 men versus 100 men on custom battle with the same factions, the same heroes, all that sort of stuff, same percentage of troops. And I basically try to do the same thing every single time. So unfortunately, with there being no proper benchmark here, I have at least tried to keep it the same across multiple runs. This one I went straight in with the medium preset because I had actually used it before to play on for a bit. So, and I knew that the medium one was the best.
As you can see, if we're looking at the pie chart here, you know, 1.35 seconds of low FPS, 1.15 seconds of stuttering. Not bad at all. It's all battle, obviously. This benchmark, that's probably the thing I was really trying to say. You know, there's no campaign map or anything, but it runs perfectly smooth on the campaign map, as you can probably imagine. You know, that's not an issue. This is sort of not worst case, but it's definitely sort of one of the more strenuous cases, I suppose. You know, me being on horseback, charging into enemies, trying to throw my spears at them while I'm on horseback, 200 men on the battlefield. You know, there's not really all that many battles that you have very often that are even that level of intensity, especially not early mid-game anyway. So I think it's a pretty good representative. We've got an average of 40 FPS, 0.1 of 27.7. This has got 0.02, but 0.02 percentage of 20.8. So, you know, really consistent, and for the majority of the time you won't have an issue. Unfortunately, there are a few noticeable dips in FPS. Now, this obviously can cause an issue, perhaps not so much in single player if you play a little bit safer, but, you know, it does only take that one sort of, especially on, well, not even on horseback, but especially when you're in melee, you know, only takes that one glitch from your computer and, you know, you're dead and you can no longer affect the battle. So it is quite important, frame rate in this, in a battle sense, which was a real shame to see. We can see from the frame times we had like one bit that was a decent spike, spike to, God, astronomical levels, 215 milliseconds, which is, well, quite frankly, just impossible. I imagine that must have been this stutter here, to be fair. It looks pretty consistent. Throughout it, we're looking at mainly on the whole, between 20 and 30 milliseconds, which is, you know, really good. Under 30 milliseconds, or around 25, is sort of where we want to be. The L shape is pretty okay. You know, 40.3 for the 99.5% is getting up to the higher levels, and we've got a big spike, and of course, you know, that tells us all we needed to know from the rest of it. So I guess what I'm trying to say is my interpretation of it from how I played it, I think is backed up here. Mostly smooth a lot of the time, with those couple of key half seconds, I guess you could say, where you know, have those little glitches, those stutters.
But not too bad, I don't think. It really is potentially a viable option in 2021, assuming that you want to, or assuming that you're more than happy to drop settings, that you want to play at 1080p, maybe even 720p. I don't know if there's many people rocking those monitors anymore. Obviously, not going to work for Cyberpunk, hence why I sort of threw in Deus Ex in there, just because it's a very similar-esque game. I think probably, you know, in many instances looks as good, has the same sort of feel and vibe to it. So, you know, there are alternatives out there, of course. It's disappointing. The thing is, though, with Cyberpunk 2077, I don't imagine that experience that I showed you is any worse than on the base PlayStation 4 or Xbox One. You know, I've not actually had a chance to have a go on them, but in terms of the frame rates we're seeing, yeah, you know, and I've pushed it as low as I can. And the thing about a lot of games like that is there's always like a really low texture overhaul that can be done. So there may well be a point, there may well be something at some point where Cyberpunk may be playable, although it may not look particularly good, although from some of the screenshots I've seen from the consoles. Yeah, I think overall though, you can be really impressed with the performance if you're still using this card. You know, in many ways it does hold up quite well. Yeah, okay, you have to play on medium, but the fact of the matter is we were still getting really smooth experiences, and a lot of the games, let's face it, that we play are not always that graphically intensive. You know, something like Bannerlord is, I suppose Squadrons is, you know, or can be, but you can dial them down when you have to. If you're going to play games, much older games, you know, maybe like Terraria or Minecraft or even Fortnite, I know we didn't do that one, but you know, those sort of games, and Rocket League, it will be perfectly adequate for that kind of stuff even now. You know, and some of them are games that I've poured hundreds of hours into. So, you know, really, yes, in many ways, it is still relevant if you've already got one. I probably wouldn't go out and buy one if I didn't have one, but that's just for me. I think the biggest downside though is the fact that it's only got that 2 GB of RAM, and that's very much was already becoming an issue and is becoming way more of an issue going forward. In terms of Bannerlord, we hit the recommended VRAM usage at medium, so going any higher would cause issues or potentially cause issues. Yeah, and it's a bit of a shame really for me overall, because that's going to limit a lot of these sort of stuff I can do in the future as that VRAM minimum becomes much higher. So just worth thinking about. Probably minimum of 4 GB nowadays is key for even for 1080p, which is just bonkers really. So recommended upgrade, I would go for a 3060 if you've got the money and you can find one. Still at 1080p, and I think you probably get the same amount of life out of a 3060 as you did from a 660 Ti, so 8 or so years I can imagine. Don't think we're too far off the money with that one, especially with the jump that we've had this generation. Fairly substantial, even though it's not as big as we were told. And if you're on a bit of a budget and you want a stopgap upgrade, you know, to maybe do a bigger upgrade in the future, a 1060 6 gig would be by far the best way to go. And it's one of the cards that I really want to have a look at in the future. So maybe we'll get my hands on one of them at some point. Problem is the graphics card market is just so inflated at the minute with all these used hardware. Like I say, even this card is going for like a third more than I paid for it. So yeah, it's just completely bonkers. But there you go. Hope you enjoyed the video today. And yeah, if you did, let me know. And if not, let me know how I can improve it. If my explanations weren't quite there or you want to know a bit more, I can definitely do some more learning myself and bring that back to you guys. So thanks for watching everybody, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye for now. Oh, and I did write a script.